Breaking. The King of England just shattered 300 years of royal silence, and what he said in the next 60 seconds could collapse the British government by Friday. At 2:17 p.m. today, King Charles did something no monarch has done in modern history. He interrupted a live session of Parliament, walked into the House of Lords without his crown, and accused Prime Minister Keir Starmer of driving Britain toward a precipice. Starmer stood frozen. 3 cabinet ministers walked out, and within 2 hours, £4.7 billion vanished from British markets. If you want the full story of how a 94-year-old war hero brought down a government, hit subscribe right now, because what I'm about to show you will leave you speechless. Here's what actually happened. Starmer was delivering a routine speech on housing policy when the Sergeant-at-Arms entered carrying the black rod, the symbol that means the monarch is summoning Parliament immediately. But Parliament was already in session. MPs looked at each other in confusion. This doesn't happen, ever. Within 90 seconds, the entire House of Commons was marching to the House of Lords, and nobody knew why. When they arrived, King Charles was waiting, but not in ceremonial robes. He wore a simple dark suit, no crown, no regalia, just a 76-year-old man who looked exhausted and furious. He raised his hand to stop the formal protocols and said, "I have watched this government drive Britain toward a precipice. I have stayed silent as protocol demands." But when the Prime Minister announced his intention to override parliamentary conventions that have protected this nation since 1688, my silence would become complicity. The chamber erupted. Conservative MPs shouted. Labour backbenchers sat in horror. And Starmer, according to multiple witnesses, stood completely motionless. His face drained of colour, unable to speak. Then Transport Secretary Louise Hay stood up and walked out. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper followed. Then Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. 3 cabinet ministers gone in under 2 minutes. But Charles wasn't finished. He pulled a single sheet of paper from his jacket and held it up. This letter is from Albert Hughes, a 94-year-old Second World War veteran from Cardiff. Mr. Hughes stormed the beaches of Normandy in 1944. He liberated concentration camps. And last month, he was told his council flat is being converted to asylum accommodation, and he has 6 weeks to leave. You could hear gasps echo through the chamber. Charles continued, his voice breaking. Mr. Hughes asked me if this is what he fought for. I have no answer for him. The silence that followed was deafening. But here's what makes this story even more devastating. Albert Hughes isn't alone. Right now, over 6,000 British veterans are homeless. David Morrison, a 71-year-old Falklands veteran, was found last week sleeping under a bridge in Portsmouth, wearing his service medals on his chest. He told reporters through tears, "I defended this country. Now my country won't defend me." Meanwhile, the government just approved £8 billion in foreign aid increases and spent £127 million on hotel accommodation for asylum seekers last year alone. Let that sink in. £348,000 per day on hotels while veterans sleep rough. Veterans wait an average of 14 months for NHS mental health treatment, but asylum seekers receive immediate healthcare, immediate housing, immediate financial support. Janet Williams, a nurse from Leeds whose father served 30 years in the Royal Navy, told The Telegraph, "My dad can't get a hip replacement, but we're funding luxury hotel stays for people who arrived last week. Where's the justice?" The polls confirmed the catastrophe. 2 hours after the King's intervention, Labour support collapsed from 38% to 24% in a single afternoon, a 14-point freefall. In traditional Labour strongholds like Manchester, Liverpool and Birmingham, some constituencies are showing 20-point drops. Margaret Bennett, a 69-year-old grandmother from Sheffield, who voted Labour for 50 years, posted a tearful video that's now gone viral. "I believed in this party, but when they ignore our veterans and roll out red carpets for people who've never contributed a penny, I can't support that anymore." That video hit 1.8 million views in 6 hours. The comments section is filled with thousands of stories just like hers. Working-class Britons who feel abandoned by the very party that claimed to represent them. A 22-year-old university student from Manchester posted another tearful video. "I thought I was progressive, but watching the King defend our values while Starmer tears them down, I was wrong about everything." That video reached 2.7 million views in 5 hours. The Labour Party just lost an entire generation in a single afternoon. Then something even more unprecedented happened. King Charles did what no British monarch has done in living memory. He named a specific piece of legislation. "The Levelling Down Britain Act," he said with barely concealed contempt, "is perhaps the most Orwellian piece of legislation I have encountered in my lifetime. It claims to empower communities while stripping them of autonomy." It promises prosperity while guaranteeing dependence, and it was rushed through Parliament with a speed that suggests the government hoped nobody would read it. Palace insiders reveal. Charles spent 3 weeks reviewing that bill line by line. He consulted constitutional scholars from Oxford and Cambridge. He met privately with former prime ministers from both parties, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, even Theresa May. All of them warned him that Starmer's legislation would fundamentally alter the balance between Westminster and the Crown. Charles was furious, but he held his tongue, until yesterday when Starmer announced plans to fast-track the bill through the Lords using emergency procedures. That's when Charles had enough. At 7:30 p.m. last night, he summoned his private secretary and dictated the speech he would deliver. For 2 hours, aides tried to talk him out of it. "Your Majesty," one reportedly pleaded, "this will destroy your relationship with the government." Charles looked him in the eye and said, "Then let it be destroyed. I will not watch this country fall into constitutional chaos while I play dress-up in a palace." The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, held a secret 4-hour meeting with Charles on Sunday evening, warning him, "You may save the country, but you could destroy the crown." Charles's response was immediate. The crown is nothing if it cannot protect the people it serves. But here's where this story gets truly explosive. Just 3 hours after the King's intervention, a leaked audio recording surfaced from a private Labour fundraiser last Saturday. You can hear Starmer's voice clearly. Charles thinks he's still relevant. Someone needs to remind him it's 2025, not 1925. The crown is a relic. We're just too polite to say it publicly. When that audio hit social media at 6 p.m. today, the hashtag #StarmerInsultsKing went to #1 in 20 minutes. Even staunch Republicans were horrified by the disrespect. The timing couldn't have been worse because it proved Charles right. The financial markets responded with brutal efficiency. Within 30 minutes of Charles's speech, the pound dropped 3.2% against the dollar. £4.7 billion was wiped from London's FTSE 100 in a single session. Goldman Sachs issued a note to clients. UK political risk now comparable to emerging markets. Recommend defensive positioning. Deutsche Bank went further, suggesting clients reduce UK exposure by 30%. Britain's cost of borrowing just increased, which means higher mortgage rates for ordinary families, higher business loans for small companies, and more expensive government debt. Chancellor Rachel Reeves watched £4.7 billion disappear in real time. Inside number 10, witnesses describe absolute chaos. Starmer called an emergency cabinet meeting for 4 p.m, but only 11 of 22 ministers showed up. The rest either resigned, refused to attend, or claimed scheduling conflicts. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, was notably absent. Her office claimed a family emergency, but sources confirm she was meeting with backbench MPs, gauging support for a leadership challenge. One Labour MP described the atmosphere as a coup in slow motion. Rayner allegedly told them, "Starmer is finished. The question is whether we all go down with him." Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, did attend the meeting, but spent the entire session on her phone. When Starmer demanded her attention, she looked up and said coldly, "I'm dealing with the economic crisis you just created." The room went silent. Junior ministers were overheard in Westminster corridors discussing succession plans. WhatsApp groups with names like Real Labour and Future Forward were plotting Starmer's removal in real time. One leaked message reads, "He's finished. The King destroyed him. We need to move fast before we all go down with him." But wait, because there's another revelation that makes this entire crisis even more damning. Leaked documents obtained by The Telegraph show that Starmer's team knew for 3 weeks that the King opposed the Levelling Down Britain Act. Palace officials sent multiple formal warnings to Downing Street, letters, private meetings, even a personal message from Charles to Starmer. The government ignored every single one. If these documents are real, and multiple sources confirm they are, then Starmer didn't just miscalculate, he deliberately provoked this crisis. Think about what that means. The Prime Minister received direct warnings from the monarch that his legislation crossed constitutional red lines. He pushed ahead anyway, gambling that Charles wouldn't dare intervene publicly. That gamble just cost him his government. One leaked message from a senior Downing Street aide reads, "PM believes King is bluffing. Push through before he can react." That message was sent 48 hours before today's intervention. They knew, they gambled, they lost. And here's the final bombshell. Those same leaked documents reveal that Starmer's advisors conducted private polling 3 weeks ago, specifically asking whether voters would support the government if the King publicly opposed them. The results were catastrophic. 67% said they would side with the King. Only 18% said they would support the government. Starmer saw those numbers and pushed ahead anyway. He had concrete evidence that confronting the king would destroy his government, and he did it out of pure arrogance. This isn't incompetence anymore. This is political suicide by choice. The Conservative Party, sensing blood in the water, immediately tabled a vote of no confidence. Rishi Sunak, who's been relatively quiet for months, delivered a speech that cut straight to the bone. When the King of England feels compelled to intervene because Parliament has lost its way, that's not a constitutional crisis. That's a failure of leadership. Tory MPs gave a standing ovation. Labour benches sat in deafening silence. Social media erupted globally. The hashtag King Charles Speaks trended in 73 countries within 40 minutes. British Twitter became a war zone, but the truly shocking development was how many traditional Labour voters sided with the King. International reactions poured in throughout the afternoon. The Canadian Prime Minister expressed support for constitutional monarchy and traditional parliamentary procedures, a clear shot at Starmer. In Australia, opposition leaders called for renewed respect for Westminster traditions. But the most damaging response came from the United States. The White House released a carefully worded statement. The United States values its special relationship with the United Kingdom and hopes for a swift resolution to current political uncertainty. That phrase, political uncertainty, is diplomatic code for disaster. American investors read that statement and immediately started pulling money out of UK markets. Veteran Labour MP Barry Gardiner didn't hold back. In 30 years in Parliament, I've never seen a Prime Minister lose control this quickly. The King didn't just criticise policy, he questioned Starmer's judgment, his integrity, his fitness to lead. That's career-ending. Sources say Starmer is pacing number 10 like a caged animal, snapping at aides, refusing phone calls. One aide described him to The Times as unrecognisable, paranoid, convinced everyone is plotting against him. Another said, he's lost in conspiracy theories, blaming everyone except himself. Screenshots from leaked WhatsApp groups reveal that some Labour MPs aren't just plotting to replace Starmer, they're discussing forming a completely new party. One message reads, Labour is dead, the brand is toxic. We need to start fresh with a new name, new leadership, new values. Another MP responds, call it the British Workers' Party, go after Reform UK voters. This isn't just a leadership challenge anymore, this is a potential party split that could reshape British politics forever. The question isn't if they'll move against Starmer, it's when. So here's where we stand. The King of England just broke 300 years of precedent to accuse the Prime Minister of constitutional vandalism. 3 cabinet ministers have resigned. Labour has lost 14 points in the polls in a single afternoon. £4.7 billion has vanished from British markets. The Deputy Prime Minister is organising a coup, and leaked documents prove Starmer saw this coming and did it anyway. This isn't just a political crisis. This is the collapse of a government in real time. If you think Starmer's finished, type resign in the comments right now. If you want to see what happens when this government falls, and trust me, it's going to fall, you need to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because we're covering every second of this historic collapse. Share this video with every British voter who needs to know the truth. The mainstream media won't tell you this story. We will. The question isn't if Starmer survives, it's how many days he has left.